I want to thank Linda for reading Psalm 37. I appreciate your help. But I need the help of all the rest of you right now. Okay? So I ask you to please bear with me. I want you to please, in your mind right now, whatever you do, don't think of a pink horse. I know they roam around with all kinds of energy. I know they demand all kinds of attention, but please don't think of a pink horse. I was afraid of that. Isn't that something? You get asked to do something, and you just have trouble doing it. And you probably are asking, what's that got to do with Psalm 37? Well, I have 2 points to make about Psalm 37. And the first one is, when I read it, I have pink horse syndrome. It says in verse 1, fret not yourself because of evildoers. Right there, I'm fretting. It says don't do it. And thereafter, I'm thinking about evildoers and how they romp and roar all around. They require all kinds of attention. They stand out from the crowd, and I'm dwelling on them and dwelling on them. And I go ahead, and you know what? I end up missing some of what is in Psalm 37. I'm to not fret. I have trouble not doing something. Okay? What are the things the Psalm says I am to do? Well, that's like trust in the Lord. Do good. Dwell in the land. Delight yourself in the Lord. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him. Be still. Wait patiently. Wait for the Lord. Now, in terms of a list of things to do, these are actions. But I'm too busy fretting, right? To sit and wait. I never thought of waiting as an action, but that's what the psalm is telling me to do. What an interesting point. Wow. Sometimes the scripture asks me to do something and I suffer from pink horse syndrome. And instead of doing what it says, I'm dwelling on something it says not. It probably doesn't happen to anybody else, does it? My second point came from something else. We were reading through recently the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus, which in large part are about the tabernacle that the children of Israel built and set up. And I was listening to some other information about that and learned some interesting things. One, I was reminded that that tent, that tabernacle that they built in the wilderness was reminding them and reminding us of the Garden of Eden. It was a place where God was and people, where there was an intersection of heaven and earth. As a matter of fact, there were symbols of this all through that tabernacle. On the draperies were these, woven into the tapestry, these 2 cherubim. Remember, there were 2 cherubim at the entrance to Eden, guarding its entrance? And inside, the tabernacle was this big menorah, this candlestick. It was the only source of light in there. And it was made of gold, or it was beautiful. Just like the tree of life. It was a source of light, source of good. Oh, and there was this table with this, sometimes called showbread in it. It's called the bread of presence. And every week, Aaron and his sons had to change out the bread on that table, and they had to eat it. In other words, they had to come into the tabernacle, into the presence of God, and dine with Him, eat with Him, dwell with Him. Isn't that interesting? So much symbolism. And that's just an example between Eden and the tabernacle. But one of the podcasts I listened to pointed out something else. There's a difference between Eden and the tabernacle. In Eden, God built it, put the humans there and said, please fill it. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill this place. That didn't go so well. Pink horses showed up. They got distracted. They didn't do what he was really telling them to do. Well, that didn't work. So now in the tabernacle, when it's built, God approaches it differently. Yes, he gives them instructions, but basically what he says is, you guys build it. And they built it. And then guess what? He filled it with his presence. Wow, that's a different route, isn't it? That kind of twists that around. If you make some space for God, he will fill it. Well, that's what this one podcast instructor was saying. He says, this is a lesson for us out of that. He said, do you know what the equivalent of that is in our modern world? He says, we call them spiritual disciplines. They could be prayer. They could be fasting. They could be singing. They could be generosity. They could be all kinds of things that we're told to do. And the purpose of them is in our lives to make space for God to come and fill. This pastor said, my first assignment as a young pastor, my coach said, I want you to take a Bible and a sack lunch and go out to the lake and sit there for 8 hours. And he said, I thought that was the dumbest assignment he could give me. He says, it took me 3 hours just to settle down. He says, but whenever I do that, that spiritual discipline of sitting quietly with God, God comes and fills it. And he says, I've had so many insights from that. Well, isn't that an interesting observation and a beautiful analogy about creating space for God? And what do you know? That's exactly what Psalm 37 is talking about. Don't fret over evildoers. No, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land. Delight yourself in the Lord. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Wait patiently for him. Those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. Oh, it says many other things. But it's interesting that the psalm ends with a statement. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. What is refuge? Oh, I looked it up. You know one of the synonyms for refuge? Sanctuary. A refuge is a haven. It's a place. It's a sanctuary. It's a tabernacle. It's a space you make for God to fill. God saves them because they take refuge in him. Now I have a different way of reading that psalm and a different thought about daily life. And what I realize is I get distracted from the wisdom that God has put right there. I want some bold action I'm supposed to take, some tremendous post I'm supposed to make on social media, some billboard I'm supposed to buy, some people I'm supposed to call out. And what does he say? Be still and wait for the Lord. Make a space for him to fill. Last year, as I went through, at this time of the year, chemotherapy and other things, wow, I'm just still amazed at the lessons and the opportunities. And one of the things that happened is it kind of cleaned up my back patio and had some help of others in doing that. And I couldn't do much. And I just had to go out there and sit. And I'd have my morning coffee out there with God and just sit there. And it was a beautiful little space. It still is. Got a few more weeds to deal with, but it still is. And God filled that. And God blessed that time and helped me. And I have to remember, I still need to do that every day. I need to make space for God to fill. That's the only way that I'll get rid of and avoid pink horse syndrome.